Hey, good evening, everyone. I'm Nina Levy. I'm the head of the chief sculpture department cheerleader here, and I'm particularly happy to have Laura Frazure here to speak with us tonight. Of course, because she is a sculptor, but I think she also does, performs the magic trick that we all hope to here at the Academy of taking really considered form and anatomical training and participation in a centuries-long tradition and making it contemporary and really conversant with contemporary art, social, political, and other issues. So Laura is kind of a triple threat because she is an anatomist, a sculptor, and an educator. She taught at she was professor at the University of Arts in Philadelphia, where she recently received a Distinguished Teaching Award. I was looking at her syllabi earlier today because she taught at the New York Academy for many years I guess from like 2007 until
2002.
2002.
Started in 2002.
Yeah. Okay. She taught Sculpture 2, 3, 4, Écorché A, Structural Anatomy, and many other classes. Let's see what else. I'm going to read this part. She led an international anatomy intensive at the Central Academy of Fine Art in Beijing for professors from the 8 top art schools in China, and that I'm not going to be able to pronounce that, but anyway, yes. So esteemed art schools throughout China. She has twice been a Discipline Award winner for the Pew Fellowship in the Arts and was the recipient of the Robert Engman Award for Sculpture from the University of Pennsylvania. She's exhibited widely in the US and beyond. And as I said, she takes the sort of century-old tradition of rendering the human form and expression and gesture and makes it contemporary and interesting in both sort of gallery works and public collaborative pieces. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Nina. Is that too loud? You all right? I've admired Nina's work for a long time, so it's been very exciting to meet her today. I'd also like to thank Dean Peter Drake for inviting me, and whereas Amy Hughes for being extremely patient and generous, helping out getting the masterclass ready. So I appreciate that. Thank you. Okay. The first image is. I'm starting out with this artist, teacher, artist kind of a thing because I've taught anatomy and art for about 28 years. And it has greatly affected my place in the world right now. The university that I taught just recently closed after 148 years, and gave us a week notice. So it's encapsulated the experience for me. So this is what I've been thinking about. So I've just got 4 images of the teaching, and the first image on the upper left is, I think, my favorite image about teaching because we're all like super focused, super interested in the information, and we're all like, it just makes the experience really, really viable and interesting for me. The image below that is of the bargaining table team at the University of Arts. We spent 3 years building the contract that we got signed and 3 years bargaining that contract, and it was complete volunteer time. So it was an experience of great learning for me, but it was also warmth with your colleagues, really battling it out. And then we move here, and some of these students are here today, but these are current students from the University of Arts that are now at another institution finishing out their their degree. And I wanted to include this image because it's about community. It's about the human factor, the relationships. There are a few other students from the University of Arts from many years ago that are here as well. And that the bonds, the relationships that you build with your students are that's really what it's about. It's very meaningful. And then the last image is just of us playing volleyball. I got a volleyball net and a volleyball, and it's about play, and play is really important, I think, as an artist in your life, and also I think in a school setting as well. Okay. So I'm introducing you to things that are important, have been important in my career as a teacher, as an artist, and I'm introducing you to my research. So there's going to be a variety of images. So anatomy is huge for me. When I was an undergraduate, I had an introductory class in anatomy. It's called Structure of the Figure, taught by Walter Erlbacher. And I call it introductory because he never talked about any muscles. He talked about, he broke the body up into the proportion blocks, and then talked about the front country of the thigh and the back country of the thigh. Maybe there's some satellite countries, here and there. But he passed away, and I was asked to teach the class. So I'm faced with this, and I certainly couldn't teach it that way. I didn't really know, the muscles. So I taught myself. I filled in the gaps. So I taught myself all the muscles, bones, names, origins, insertions, things like that. So, and then after I got through that process, I realized that those kind of things were probably important for the students to learn as well. So I kind of altered his class a little bit and made it kind of a hybrid between écrochet and between his proportion blocks. So, but it was a autodidacts. Milan Kundera. Do you know Milan Kundera, the writer? He says that autodidacts are very insecure. So I think that's probably true, because it's never been told to you. You're just sort of researching the stuff yourself. But I think the main issue with being an autodidact with anatomy is pronunciation. You never hear anybody say the word. And this was before you could go on your phone and say, how do you pronounce latissimus dorsi? So you had to look up in a book and follow all the phonetic things. So that was it was an interesting experience. Okay, but anatomy is a subject that is so deep. You can continually learn more and more about it. Every year that I taught, I learned more about the subject. So this feedback loop that was occurring between the teaching and then my learning, the students' learning, and then my art practice was very important to me. Okay, so not only was it important to my art practice, it also was probably the most important skill that I had to help me, make money, actually be in the world. My first teaching job, I applied to do figure modeling, but I didn't have any experience. But I learned that Walter's class hadn't been taught anymore, so they offered me the class because I knew anatomy, or I had taken his class and I was using it. So the anatomy skill, and I know a majority of your students from this institution, so it's a big shout out to the school because you're going to be learning really important skills. And I really pay attention in anatomy class because not a lot of people know that information, and it can be very important for your career. So it enabled me to go to China 3 times and teach. And that was an incredible experience. This is Yang Jiannan, and I like to include this image in every single one of my presentations because it's so crazy. This is a heroic painting that he made of the International Anatomy Intensive that I taught at the Central Academy of Fine Arts. And this was the second year I went. The first year I went was because of this institution. a student, Chao Yi, asked, he sort of worked out for someone to go over and teach anatomy. So I was like, I would love to do that. And I went, and it went great. And they asked me to come back the next year and to do this. So I taught anatomy professors from the top eight schools in China my anatomy system. A couple of those professors had actually written books. So they knew anatomy. It wasn't about learning the specifics of anatomy, but it was about the system. They were very much trained to respond to the surface and respond to perceptual information. And anatomy enables you to, this is the class. Anatomy enables you to invent, to build something, from your intellect, from your imagination, rather than responding to perceptual information. Which, again, that was something that has been very influential to me. Okay, 1986. I got my hair cut by the same barber that did the Stray Cats. Okay, anybody know Stray Cats here? Rockabilly group, right? Okay, all right. And Harvey is the only person here, Harvey Citron, who was my teacher and also taught here, recognizes me in this photo because he was my teacher at that point, and he was my first teacher for the figure. So thank you, Harvey. I've never thanked you. Thank you so much. You were a great teacher. I really appreciate it. Okay, so. I'm in school, I know nothing, I see images of people modeling the figure, and I'm like, why would anyone want to do that, But we had to take the class. And so I took the class, and it was just like totally got pulled in, totally got, it's like this amazing unknown kind of object. It's mysterious. I mean, obviously we're all embodied, but we have no idea what's going on underneath the skin. So it was fascinating to me, and I also sort of started, being interested in the nude, and have been dedicating myself to that tradition ever since. And again, it's not like I sort of knew what I was getting myself into necessarily, but it was about curiosity and interest. And when someone's nude, when the form is nude, you can, or when the body is nude, you can see the form. So that was something that, it was compelling. It was something to learn. Okay, so I'm going to touch upon some early work, and I've got some those are three of heads of sculptures that I did. As soon as I got out of school, I kind of did. I studied as much as I could, just looking at my own body, I had people model for me. And so I decided, and then after that, I did about 10 years of working for set designs for theater and some independent films. And I thought at first I thought it was a waste of time. And then after I got back into making art, I decided to come back to art. And I thought, oh no, that really wasn't a waste of time, because working with texts, I feel like I learned visual metaphor, or an idea of approaching things. Dealing with text. So I thought it was actually very valuable. Nothing is not valuable. Okay, so I like to work in series. So I set up a series for myself. I had all these kind of like just words for content. And I wanted to do self-portraits because I was dealing, I had my body. I'm always available anytime. I don't have to pay, whatever. And in the tradition of Cindy Sherman, using your body as artistic canon, kind of, and then altering it to support your idea. So that's what I was thinking. I was doing a horn series. We've got the horns of jealousy, horns of lust, and then I was thinking of doing horns of wisdom, but the figure ends up not having horns. But you'll see that later. And this one is love. And I also was interested the Moses and the Buddha head. I have them here because I was thinking about physical manifestations of internal qualities. All right, so that's why it sort of, the Buddha, the bump on the Buddha, I always thought it was a bun. It's not a bun. That's where apparently when he achieved enlightenment, there was the skull changed form. So that's really amazing. And then the horns or the light rays coming out of Moses, represented some kind of special knowledge. Okay, this is an image from Fellini's Satyricon, and I love movies. Watch movies on a computer about this size. If you get it real close to you, it looks good. And I'm constantly stopping the films. If I see an image, or if I see a head, if I see an expression, I'm constantly stopping and taking pictures. This one, so I wanted to do horns of wisdom, right? So this is a being. It's a hermaphrodite that was revered because of its physical conformation. So thought that this person was of greater value because of that, and these, again, are two examples of the early work. The figure on the left was self-portrait as a Japanese bride. In the Shinto tradition, they wear a hat when they get married to hide the horns of jealousy. So I thought, okay, I can play with that, and it's a self-portrait. It's actual size or life scale, modeled directly in plaster. So it's got two pipes coming up each leg, and took me a year and a half. No small task, right? At that point, I was thinking about mixing materials and choosing materials that were appropriate for whatever object, whatever part of the body. Like the hair is asphalt crack sealant. And it's pretty awesome because if you put it right on top of foam, it sort of carves like stone, like soapstone. And the horns are wax, and I made the eyes out of glass, and all this stuff, and I painted with casein. So I was very much into kind of being, pushing and playing with materials. The figure on the right has a new name. I'm calling it Oracle, and this is what relates to the previous image, the hermaphrodite. And this is a very pivotal figure for me because previous to this, I had made all self-portraits, again, that, sort of following the Cindy Sherman tradition. But this figure, I was thinking that I was reading Jeffrey Eugenides' Middlesex. It's an awesome book. It's about a hermaphrodite, and I was thinking about how the body reveals knowledge or enables knowledge. And so I thought that if a person had the qualities of two genders, that that would be, a position, they'd be in a position of knowing. And so connecting that to this idea of the oracle from Fellini. So I felt like I was on the right track when I saw that in Fellini's. This was not the first wax figure. I had done a beeswax before, but this was the first microcrystalline figure that I did. And you can see he's pretty tall. Jack, my photographer, is a tall guy. He might be like 6'3" or something. So the figure was 8 feet tall. I had to cut it into several pieces to get it out of one of my studios and to get it into another studio. So this is the life of a sculptor. Okay.
That's on an armature.
Yeah, that was on a welded armature. So it was welded rebar. Yeah, I built this whole contraption to move it around and everything. So they went several places with me until, but let's see, but this started invention for me, the idea. So everything sort of broke open. Okay. I was just looking at the time. It's not 7 p.m., is it? Maybe it stopped. It is 7 p.m.? Okay. I was just trying to be reasonable and trying to keep up, and now I'm like, okay. All right, so now we're seeing images that I was trying to, or like, interested in digital media. This was 4 years after Maya was invented, 4 years after Maya came out. And it's a 3D modeling program. This is my first modeled object, starting with a cube, and sort of pushing and pulling all the faces and facets and everything. And I found it interesting. It sort of hurt my body a little bit. You'll see a little more, but I'm an active person. Constantly need to move around, and the computer kind of puts you in a position where you're raising your shoulder and always using the mouse, and that it affected me. So I was doing an animation with this. So I modeled the figure, and then I wanted to animate it. And in animations, you get to see the frames. And then I'm looking at this, and I'm saying, wow, those poses are really interesting. Isn't that interesting? There are ways that you can think about, posing. You can think about, and finding meaning, gesture and pose of the body and finding meaning. This is historical photography by Edward Muybridge. He's he made these books of all these different people moving through space, doing things, sweeping, picking up buckets, Apparently they were photographed in Philadelphia, and they used the models from PAFA, came and were photographed. But so I was looking at these, and he made these for artist references. So I was looking at this and thinking about the walk cycle, thinking about what all the positions the body gets into when one moves through space. So I modeled a female figure because that's my, I'm kind of focused on the female body. And you see a rendered body, you see the mesh, and then all those spheres and cones are the skeleton. So you embed the skeleton within this thing that you modeled, and you can get it to move. And so I did a walk cycle, and these are about 8 inches high. They look bigger to me, but they're only about 8 inches, and they're printed. They're 3D printed. So this is something I have not touched. I have not ever touched this object. You can make it really big. You can make an eye as big as the screen, so you can get into detail and stuff like that. But it's not a physical object. Yet you achieve this physical object, which is kind of interesting. And you can see, you'll see on the surface, there's like a moire pattern it has a really beautiful material quality. And they're cast solid, so the thinner areas are sort of glow, and everybody responds to that. Everybody says something about that. So they're interesting in some ways. So I started playing around with these bodies and pulling a headline or a line from an article in the newspaper. Down south in Dallas, a high school teacher was arrested after she grabbed another teacher by the hair and dragged her across the room, punching and kicking her. So I'm like, this is horrible. I think I'll do a sculpture, right? That this pulling from your culture, pulling from things that are upsetting. I ended up looking on my phone for cat fights, and that's like what they call when two females are fighting, so it's this disgusting kind of stuff, but I like to think that, I'm reforming the subject matter. But okay, but when you work on the computer, you can do 2-dimensional or 3-dimensional. And so I did a 3-dimensional print as well. This is about 5 inches tall. Again, in light hardening resin, and it's solid. And so this is a close-up, and I made her facial expression. It's about half an inch big, but I could make it big on the screen. She's sort of grimacing, and I really enjoyed that. Okay. So this is a quote from one of my favorite authors, Nabokov, and should I read it? I'll read it. The arms of consciousness reach out and grope, and the longer they are, the better. Tentacles, not wings, are Apollo's natural members. So this is from his memoir. And I thought this was awesome because I like the tactility of it, right? The tentacles, and I'm a sculptor. But yet I thought that this expansive kind of, sort of sponge-like approach was what he was talking about. Whatever you're exposed to, whatever's in your culture or other cultures, I think is interesting to me in particular. And media, film, fashion photography. Okay, so this is where we come to next. Bodily rhetoric is a subject that I kind of made it up, but I didn't really make it up. I did see it. I did see the term under a picture, and they were talking about something else. And I thought, oh, bodily rhetoric, that's really interesting. I think I can invent a definition for that, which would suit me really well. And I think it sounds, it has a rich sort of suggestion of content. So I think anatomy sensitized me to gesture. And so I'm really focused on that when I'm looking at art and sculpture. And I'm going to read my definition for bodily rhetoric. It is denaturalized figural attitudes or poses invented to express ideas intrinsic to a particular medium. Okay, so the first two figures on that side, the first two images actually sort of fulfill that, that definition. The Kuros figure, the pose originally came from Egyptian sculpture, but if you look at it, I hadn't noticed really, but it looked like the person was walking, but he's really not walking. Both feet are planted on the ground, completely planted, and his left foot is in front of his right foot, and his left arm is also in front of the right arm. So it's really not, it's not about naturalism, it's not about something that one saw in the world. It's about something that's completely invented to fulfill a conceptual framework. So I really like that. And then looking at fashion photography, I was doing a sculpture about vanity, and so I started looking at fashion photography, and I thought the poses were really interesting, and they're super weird. And I mean, if you look at this, she's not doing anything that, it's emotive. I think it looks like she's in grief or suffering in some fashion, but it's very strange. And there's always a flexion in the rib cage in the majority of fashion photography. Okay, so I'm sort of into that and kind of thinking about pulling from those poses for poses for my sculpture. And then I included the poses on the two images on the right because they're photography, it's documentary, right? But it's also, the first one actually was staged there, and the idea was to produce photographs for painters, sort of like the Muybridge. But it could be, it's not staged in the way the fashion photography was, the pose. It's a naturalistic pose. It could be documentary. And then this is from a protest in Philadelphia, so it's totally a natural gesture, although it has meaning as well, as you all I'm sure know. So I was thinking about those two, that idea is if I pulled the poses from them and translated them into a sculpture media, that would create content, that would produce or reveal the meaning of those poses beyond strictly documentary. Okay, so I'm doing this. I'm doing this subject of vanity. So I'm looking at a bunch of fashion photography, and I'm trying to find poses that don't make any sense, that are aesthetic, but don't necessarily, they're not walking, I don't know what they're doing, but they're really interesting. So I'm looking at that, but I have a couch and I need someone to sit on the couch. This is what, I made this couch, I told you I did theater, set design. And so I did this one theater set of this upholstered garden, and all topiaries that were all upholstered, and the process of upholstery is really interesting, and I really loved it. So I thought, okay, after that was over, okay, I'm gonna make something, I'm gonna upholster something. So I made this couch, and I upholstered it in muslin, sort of an intermediary material. It wasn't ever finished. I carried that damn thing around with me for about 8 years, and it's like, I'm really interested in this. I don't know what's going to happen with this. But then this idea for Vanity came up. I said, okay, I'm going to have three figures maybe sitting, or I'll just start with one, but maybe, women sitting on the couch. So then I came up with this idea for choosing a material that was visceral and, for the upholstery. And I thought that platinum blonde synthetic human hair would be the perfect choice. And I'll go into this a little bit later, but I sort of broke up the wigs and sort of chose the appropriate form or quality for the different part of the couch. And I was looking at animals, looking at a lion, who has the big long hair up top, and then it gets short as it goes through the rest of their body. And so I placed that shorter, wilder hair in the, what could be considered the head. Okay, so I needed someone to sit on the couch, so I started looking at seated figures. And I found this one, and she's so languid. Look how languid she is. She's got that nice S curve. So I started to look at the body and look at the actual pose. Her pelvis, sort of lined up with her knees, right? Sort of normal, kind of. And she's got slight rotation in her rib cage, right? But look at her arms. Her arms totally swing over her body and land on the opposite side. Very weird. Okay, and then look at her head. She's turning her head and she's tilting her head, or abducting her head. And then, but yet, look, she's turned it a little too much. She has to move her eyes back, to look at the camera. So that kind of stuff really interests me. But I ended up choosing someone that was a little more straightforward, a little less arch. So I isolated the figure because, in relationship to this, because I wanted to highlight the fact that I'm not pulling anything from the photograph other than the pose. The body is completely different proportions. The sculpture's like 5'2". Obviously, models are super tall. She's youthful, and her head's really sort of kind of big. Models can have be 9-headed. There was one model that was actually 10-headed. Fashion illustration is basically 10 heads. So I was only doing that, and that's super important. So here's the sculpture in its finished state. I modeled directly in microcrystalline wax and added some kind of pigment below in the surfaces. So I was thinking that I wanted to look like a natural material, kind of like stone or something like that. And at this point, I'm finishing it only with butcher's wax because I'm making all of this up, No, I didn't, I'm just making this stuff up and I'm trying things. So butcher's wax on wax, it's produced a nice hard surface. It doesn't last though. So it became an issue. But the couch is about 8 feet long, the figure's 5'2". And I'm thinking about beauty, luxury, attraction, repulsion. And this is the title of the piece, a quote from Stendhal. And again, connecting it back to the idea of vanity. I decided to do a series because I like series, right? And that kind of structure really forces you to be creative. When you do a second, of a series. You know, you do the first one, it's like a one-off. Oh, this is fun. I'm going to try this. I'm going to do this. But when you do a second, you're like asking yourself, what did I do? What did I actually do? You know, how can I build a sister to this figure? You know, I want them to be in the same world. You know, so sort of like, what were my choices? And it makes you really step back, but it also pushes you forward in a way that just doing, you know, just one-offs doesn't do. So I use the one reclining figure as the pose for that. And so I had to do a second piece of furniture too, because I want an epic experience. I want that material quality. I want a lot, you know, from these things. So I want to create a world. And so the furniture had to be designed to go in the same world as the couch. And so this is it's kind of like a bear rug. I'm thinking about it like a bear rug because there's a pillow or like a beanbag chair. I think I actually used a beanbag chair. And then it's a rug. So it's a combination beanbag chair and rug. But I was looking at it, it's like this big mass at the end of a rug. I was thinking, oh, it's like a bear rug. So I was thinking about, again, you know, connoting the head or connoting certain parts of the body with how I was arranging the hair. Thinking about materials and material quality. I realized that I didn't really like I did this again with the sort of pigments underneath, and it's kind of mysterious, but it also looked like she was bruised in some spots, and I really didn't want that. So I kind of was thinking of a monochromatic experience. And again, mixing materials are super important to me. Some details, and that's Romy Schneider from La Piscine. You guys know that movie. If you don't, you should see it. It's awesome. But look at her. Look at the flesh on the fur. Okay, so here's a studio shot. This is not my current studio. I now have a studio on my third floor of my row home, which I share with my husband. It's not pretty. You know, this was a luxury. It was a huge space. We had 3 sort of big bays, and you know, got a lot of big work done. But you'll see that there's a number of things active at the same time. And I tend to do that. I like to make a lot of armatures so I can see them. Direct modeling enables me to start and finish a sculpture, you know, with my hands continually on it. It's not like when you work in clay, sometimes when you model it in clay, then you make a mold, and then you cast it, and then you get it into another material. So there are all these steps in mediation. I like to interact and be intuitive or whatever, responsive to the object continually from start to finish. That's important. So I like to see them and have them around. That takes up space. Okay, so here's some process shots. I've got foam, those of you that are gonna join me this weekend for the wax modeling workshop, masterclass. You'll be doing something like this. We're not this big, but using foam. We've got foam and wire. And you start with foam, you bulk up the masses with foam, and then you melt the wax, you let it cool, and it starts to harden and be like butter on a hot day, you know? And then you kind of scoop it up and you apply it, and it's a really beautiful modeling material. So that's that. A couple stages. She's bald. I'm looking at Stephen Francis James, who is in this picture. You can see the little head in the middle. But interns, it's a thrill to have students into your studio helping. And I had to make a third object, or third piece of furniture. So I thought I wanted to make a poof. And you can see the process of using the wigs as a upholstering surface. You know, I cut the wigs up and then used, you know, because they're different qualities, different lengths, different, you know, parts of the wigs. And then so I cut it all up and used the different parts where it seemed appropriate to me and sewed each one on there. I've purchased over 200 wigs from these people. So they're wonderful on Girard Avenue in Philadelphia. And here's the third piece to the vanity series. And so there's the poof, you're familiar with that. The pelvis is a sculpture, is a recycled fragment from an earlier sculpture. And I'm me with a sawzall, watch out, you know. I do it to my sculptures only, but you know, it's kind of fun, you know, because those sculptures that you feel like you're beyond, or you've moved past. I have a storage facility that's costing, what, $350 a month. You know, it's a total drag, and so I'm trying to downsize. So I get my sawzall out, and I'm like, whoa, that pelvis is obviously erotic and interesting, and so I thought I'd put it on the poof just for fun. Okay. Following, you probably recognize those poses from the grid that I showed you first off. I wanted to use those. It's interesting to me. I wanted to use those, and this is purely for aesthetic reasons. It's just about beauty. You know, I'm just trying to make the most beautiful things I can make. Sort of, you know, what, and again, I'm making it up, kind of responding to the armature, and again, trying to make a consistency within the series. And then I kind of look at them and I say, there's a group of sculptures in Philadelphia that are on the Schuylkill River, and they're like the philosopher, the astronomer, you know, and they're these men standing around, you know, it's sort of like representing what the culture values. So I'm thinking about these in the same way. So I'm naming this the actor and then the athlete, you know, because this is what we value, and then I'm kind of responding to the poses. Okay, Louise Bourgeois. It is the form, not the content. The revenge of the form. Everybody knows about the contents. Nobody can analyze the form. The form is the refuge of creativity. Okay, I want you to be thinking about that, and then looking at their backs. You know, and thinking about invention, not using a model, thinking, you know, it's kind of just responding formally and intuitively. Okay, with their heads. And they're looking at us intently. Here's some installation views. Another installation view. Okay. A student brought in an anatomy book for me. You know, they always do this. It's wonderful. And I love transparent bodies. So I was like, oh, this is amazing. I love this. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, wait a minute. Look at the guy. Look at him. He's just lifting those weights, just in his zone. And then look at every single woman in every page. Look at them. They're looking back at you. You know, the photographer, probably a guy, sorry. You know, so, come on, honey, look at me. You know, I'm over here, honey, look at me. You know, whatever. I don't know what he said, but, you know, or who, whatever. But look what it does. You know, every female is looking at you. And so those women were not in a position of power in that situation. You know, they were doing what they were told, just like fashion models, just like actors, you know, you know. But I think it's interesting. Okay, so this was, these are the actor, the artist and the poet. And my first wall piece, thinking about, you know, bringing it up to the wall. These are 24 inches, the same within a series as the other standing figures. And thinking about the gaze in particular, because they're both looking in a direction at you, came from the Prada ad. You know, what are these ladies doing? Laying on the floor with those big bags? I don't know, but you know, it's weird and wonderful. I like how they're flopping, folding over each other. And again, mixing materials. Very, very interested in that. Thinking about, again, the bear rug or some kind of sensuality. I decided to do another wall piece, and I'm not a two-dimensional artist, so there's something about the wall that sort of recalls the two dimensions. So I'm trying to think about how to think about arranging these objects on the wall. So my mother had this fabulous book. It's an accordion style flower arrangements from the O'Hara School, beautiful, printed. And I thought, oh, look at this one. I had two elements, and this was called the cascade arrangement. And I thought I'd put one arrangement up top and then have the other look like it was sort of dripping down. This is the first in a series of works about animal and human relations, let's say. Like I have one in the works of Jane Austen and her cow, because there's an idea or a theory that Jane died of bovine tuberculosis. So in this age of COVID, that was really, I think that's pretty interesting. It's called the milkmaid's disease. And then Siegfried and Roy, does those names ring a bell? So I've got a sculpture of a tiger dragging the man off the stage. I think it was Roy. So kind of playing with this. But this is different. This is almost poetic, I think. And it's about parallel experiences. Because obviously we can't, the animal world and the human world. Like Herzog's movie, The Grizzly Man, right? He thought he was communicating or on the same zone with a grizzly bear. It ended very badly, So I've modeled the monkey who I was thinking of as my husband. He thought that was funny, and he's eating a mango. And then, which is a sensual experience. And then this beautiful female is, she's dreaming of her lover. So there's parallel experiences. It's called the picnic, because I wanted to think about them in the same realm. But then with the sculpture on the shelf, it kind of separates it, pulls it out into a different plane. This is the fashion ad that I pulled the pose from. When I saw this, I'm like, oh my God, she looks like she's been assaulted. It's horrible. It's all like, looks like there's trash around. They're doves, by the way. It was horrible. And there's even, like, look at her legs. Look at the shadows of the leaves on her legs. They look like bruises. I'm like, this is really horrible. Everybody knows Gustave Flaubert or Madame Bovary, right? Apparently, he hated the values of the bourgeoisie. And the 5 years it took him to write Madame Bovary were the worst years of his life. It's because he's experiencing those values repeatedly over and over, every day. And so I'm a proponent of making things derived from things that give you rage, or upsetting, or things that you dislike as a generative principle. I try to translate it or to mediate or modify, but it's emerging from it's catching my attention, let's say, and so I'm focusing on that and then moving forward. Here's a detail. The figure is 24 inches. The monkey is about 9 inches. And they're made of epoxy sculpt, or a modeling compound. And Owen Burke, who's in the room, tried for years to get me to try epoxy sculpt. Laura, you gotta try this material. Laura, you gotta try this material. And I was resistant because I thought it would be too hard, frankly. Just too hard, too much time to get it. But I love it. And it's especially the the black. Epoxy sculpt is a non-toxic modeling compound, and you model it in small little batches like this size, a 2-part, mix them together, you knead it, and it hardens in an hour and a half. So I'm doing this in small batches. They hardens like rock, and it's okay because I can file it, I can sand it, and everything's good, and it's durable. Wax pieces are not durable. People go up to them with their fingernails and say, "What is this?" You know, and it's like, it's crazy. So, but I love wax, but this is different. Okay. Facial expressions. Really, really into facial expressions. This is Messerschmitt and historical sculptor. And then again, when I'm watching movies, drawing, you know, stopping them, finding faces that I find moving. So the 3 movies, and that's from an opera. I got that from the newspaper. Modeling on the computer, thinking about facial expression, again, playing around. You'll see that the head on the left-hand side has been smoothed, and so it looks, the form is horrible. I think the form is horrible. It's rubbery, you know, kind of generic. The computer, you press a button and the computer does it. You know, it's like the AI version or whatever. So when I printed this is 5 inches in life. It's about this big. When I printed it, I didn't smooth it. I wanted the facets, and you can see them in the neck. You can see them pretty much everywhere. But this is cast hollow or printed hollow, and I thought the facets were good to retain because it recalls the you know, the process. People, when I showed it, I sprayed it actually blue, and then I wasn't there at the opening, but people thought it was carved because they could see the facets that were created, and they were thinking that they were tool marks, and I thought that was really, really interesting. During, I guess, I don't know when, I think it was after COVID, or I you know, was thinking about sort of giving back to the community, thinking about some kind of communication with my community, and thinking also about how to put skills to use, or make them useful in the world. And so I volunteered as an artist for this project that gets artists to work with parents who have lost a child to gun violence. So this is a portrait of Troy Smith Jr., who was murdered when he was 23 years old in Philadelphia. And I worked from a few photographs, you know, from the phone, and you know, I couldn't figure out the shape of his skull, you know, or the ear, you know, because everything, you know, this is his mother I'm dealing with, right? You know, how they know it's. Obviously, you know, so how do I make this object? How do I make this recall? So it was really challenging. I would send images to her. She would send back hearts, and you know, the eyes are a little more squinted or something. You know, give me, you know, pointers like that. It was tremendously moving, and it was a beautiful experience. And it didn't, of course, alleviate anything, but it added something positive to the experience. And it's about 9 inches high. The head's about 9 inches high. And I thought that was appropriate because it was recollective, and you know, something about life scale, you know, when you're not dealing with a person that's alive. Okay, and this is epoxy sculpt also. And I was going to get to that point. The black is absolutely beautiful. It's the best of all the epoxy sculpt, because the other colors, maybe Owen has a different opinion, but the other colors, there's like this, I don't know what it is in it, but sometimes this amber stuff comes to the surface on some of the colors, like the natural color. It's sort of like give it a year or two, and it has this yellow amber kind of a skin on it, which is really weird. The black doesn't do that. And I sand it and finish it with a mineral oil so it looks like obsidian. You know, it's beautiful. Okay, so format. So responding to, I love it when the walls are broken up into these grids, into these sections. You know, it's sort of design-wise. I really like that. And I'm looking, I don't know what this was from. I'm looking at how that head is sort of relating to the wall. And again, I've been thinking about wall pieces and trying to think about how I can incorporate the wall into some sculptures, do some wall sculptures. So also looking at advertising, the disembodied fragmentary and disembodied heads. These women are really kind of, they all have their mouths open. You know, it's like this weird eroticism that is compelling. Let's see. And yeah, so it's about the use and commodification of the female and objectification as it relates to the cropping. This opposite pole, beauty, just looking at beauty. This is Marlene Dietrich. I've seen every movie she's ever done. You know, taken hundreds. Look at that. This is gorgeous. And again, mixing of materials, the big fur collar, but just beautiful. And the word scopophilia, which was introduced by Freud as a concept. It's about the pleasure of looking and about the pleasure of being looked at. Voyeuristic and exhibitionist, as well as narcissistic overtones. And it's often used referring to women in film. Looking at no masks for their expression, trying to, you know, it's really difficult to model a relaxed face. You know, every little bump can bring tension to a form. So that's something. It's a difficult task. And then the woodcut on the right. This was an invention. Utamaro, probably not saying that right. I apologize. Invented this format. It was called the big-headed woman seen from the waist up. Something along those lines, you know, and this was completely new. He worked in the 1750s to the 1830s. So there was a look towards in Japan at that time, a look towards everyday subject matter too. So everyday people, but these were beautiful women, big sellers. Okay, they sold out as soon as they printed them. Okay. So these pieces were a collaboration with Caroline Furr, a painter, thinking about those rectangular forms on the wall, thinking about the heads, mixing materials, and also the open facial expression, trying to make a optimistic and you know, just kind of otherworldly expression. She didn't see the sculpture when she was making the thing. We talked about wallpaper, talked about pattern, but also talked about the word desire. And I think I showed her the fur. And I was thrifting all of this fur. This is all recycled fur, thrifting it from jackets and stuff, you know, cutting them up and reusing. For the next one, looking at ecstatic expressions. St. Teresa, and then lots of Buddhas in China. Look, here's a scale reference. This was like 3 stories high. It was it's a Dule temple in between Beijing and Tianjin, and incredible. So this next one, the word was te, which is a Chinese word. And it's about an experience of mystic transcendence, a person in a heightened ecstatic state, or an inner potency inherent in substances, things, and people. So that was my goal. You can see also in these 2 pieces, maybe you can't, I can sort of tell on my screen. This is when I first did it, and the head's whiter. The microcrystalline wax with responding to UV gets a little manila color, kind of gets creamy. And so it yellows over time, which I think is really beautiful. But there's also two different materials around their heads. This is rabbit fur from thrift stores, recycled, reused. And then the other one's shearling. This piece went to Beijing, was in the Beijing Biennale. And customs was like all over me, because you need to have a source for any natural material that you're shipping out of the country. And I'm like, okay, the thrift store on 13th Street in Philadelphia, that wasn't gonna cut it. So I went to IKEA and got some shearlings and cut them up and tried to recreate the drape. The rabbit draped so much more beautifully, but whatever. Microcrystalline wax again. Okay, I'll tell a little story about the finishing. When I was doing those 24-inch figures, I'm getting the feeling that the butcher's wax is just not cutting it. I'm putting a couple layers on it, but it's sort of, I don't know what it is, the interaction between the microcrystalline and the butcher's wax kind of softened the butcher's wax in a way that was weird. So I have to figure out what kind of finish I'm going to put on these. So I come up with this idea. The 24-inch figures, when I first made them, they were so clear that I couldn't see the surface and I couldn't see the form. So I thought I wanted to add some pigment. I wanted to add some oil paint to something. So I covered the surface with a thickened linseed oil with some oil paint in it. All right. So that covered, and it was thickened linseed oil, so it took like maybe a week to dry or something like that. So that was good. And then I put a varnish on top of that, like a matte varnish on top of that, because the linseed oil is shiny as anything, and that wasn't what I was going for. So when I had this concept for how I could finish these, I called up a restorer friend of mine, and I told him, and he said, why don't you do it and then wait 2 years to see if it works? So I said, well, they're going to be in a show in 6 months, so that's not going to necessarily work, but I'm going to try it. And it did work. It totally worked. Everything adhered to the surface. I didn't have any bubbles, no disconnecting or whatever, however you might say it. We're talking about materials. But so it worked. Again, this is like nobody, it's like when you're just trying this stuff out, you're inventing the processes, inventing things, and sometimes it works. Continuing with the facial expressions, this is during COVID. These are all images from social justice and abortion rights protests, and the woman in the center, I saw her image, and I saw her face, and I was like, that's amazing. I was like, the rage, I was so into the rage and the expression of rage and the female voice. It was just like, this is, so I went searching for them. And, I looking at all, they were from different protests in different parts of the country. Detroit, Philadelphia, Austin. The woman in the green shirt, she's like 13 years old, and she's at an abortion rights. She's thinking about her future. And look at the intensity. And I was it made me feel so good to look at their faces. So I said, okay, I'm going to do a series. And also looking at, this is a Chinese guardian for a temple. And this great stylization, but it's still the same intensity of emotion. And I really like that. So here's a process shot. Starting out, I've got something on the wall that's not the final thing. I ended up doing a smaller, sort of a disc, but this is the working armature, how it attaches to the wall. So it's just foil and then wire. I've got a steel pipe coming up with a flange on the end, this is attached to. And then I'm using air dry clay this time. So again, I'm trying all these different direct modeling materials, because That's the only thing that makes me happy. And I'm using air dry clay, so I'm building it just like you would ceramics, because we're looking at a 30% shrinkage rate, and I wanted it to shrink and latch on to the foil at the same time. So this is the process. And that's the finished piece in clay. It's not dry yet. These are a couple others. The one on the right was the first one I did, and that was of that central woman. And it was such a small image, and I kind of like, well, it's about the expression, it's about the, I didn't know, I don't think I knew I was going to do it more, but I mean, that's silly. But I didn't really, I made an expression, but I don't know whether it was true to her. But the more I looked, the more I was like getting so refined in my decision making about the choices of rage, and seeing what really meant something to me, that the modeling became more specific with each one I did. So that's another thing about working in a series that I think is very interesting. So I modeled these, let them dry, and I sanded some of the surfaces. They were rough. They took 3 days. I did each one in 3 days, and they're about this big. So it's pretty sizable, but fast. And I really enjoyed that because every other material I was been working with is very labor intense. So it was a pleasure. Decided to gold leaf them because I wanted to connote value. And so these are the processes of gold leafing. And I discovered, though, with the gold leaf, it's kind of, it's not really recommended that sculptors do expressions that are so reliant or so like instantaneous, or so extreme. It's kind of a dangerous thing to do. So so that temporality of the emotion and the expression, after I gold leaf them, I thought, oh, this is really interesting, the way the light is playing over the surface. It was a very active surface. So I thought that would, it kind of breaks up the form, and it kind of responds and relates to the temporality of the emotion. I think. And you can see that they're coming off the wall, kind of even adding an angle here and there to sort of suggest the gesture of the body as well. Okay. Again, we're at the same time, protests in Philadelphia, looking at just looking at the news, everybody was doing it, right? And, responding to what you're seeing, everything's in your consciousness. So, again, I was inspired by the figure, she's throwing back or returning a tear gas canister. And I thought, that's so brave, so amazing, so powerful. And I thought, okay, I'm going to isolate. I'm going to focus on these poses and repeat them. So I went around trying to find other poses that I thought were communicative, and I thought that this is all I had of her, so I had to invent the rest of her body. You'll see, and thought that was a great expression. So I did a series of 12-inch figures. This is epoxy sculpt as well. They're real small. These were modeled in a different way though than the larger figure. I modeled these kind of like an exquisite corpse, modeling 1 foot, finishing it to the surface, and then letting it harden, modeling the leg that attached to that 1 foot. I had established, the pelvis, the rib cage, and the head. So I had that. But for the rest of it, I did it in sections, like one thigh and then the other thigh. It's like, this is not the way. It was a huge challenge. And I decided that I wouldn't do any subsequent work on them. No filing, no sanding. So you can so you work, so I focused on the one section and worked on it till it was, rendered the way I thought. So I think there's a weirdness to the bodies, because you're supposed to, establish the whole figure, get everything working together, refine, work from the general to the specific. So this was done in a different way. It was challenging, but I really enjoyed it. The surface, again, I did use some files on the hands just to work it out. I kept the ethnicity, the pose, and the hairstyles of the women, because I wanted some connection to them. It's a different idea. It's not about beauty. It's about something else. I wasn't inventing these bodies. I was inventing the bodies. I wasn't inventing the beings. And I'm calling this historical fiction. This is an installation shot. Okay, this is the last section. Traveling in China, my favorite things were live rock temples, and which essentially is an architecture carved into and out of a rock face. It's an incredible experience to be in these places. This was a huge Buddha, and I'm noticing, you can see there's a carved area that doesn't have any color. You can see the surface of the rock. But I'm noticing that there's a surface that's coating the sculptures. And I looked close on one, and it had, you can see it was clay, and it had fibers of grass and straw or something in it. So I thought that was interesting. And then I learned about Ousmane Sow, who's a Senegalese sculptor, and making these huge, muscular, amazing sculptures from rags, from plaster, from mud, from whatever he has on hand. And I love the rough and ready idea about this, the scale of them, and the fact that again they were just sort of made. And I came up with an idea for an inexpensive way to make public sculpture, temporary public sculpture. And so basically making armatures and then mixing clay with straw, which I changed a little later, I'll tell you about that. And then letting them dry, they crack and dry, and they last. They last. This group of sculptures, this was my first. I invited Owen Burke and James D'Assassino to make compositions, and I had 30 people working in 3 hours. It was 3 hours. 3 hours, like a workshop. 30 people in 3 hours made 6 figures. And boom, you've got public sculpture, and it costs steel is pretty cheap, and it costs the price of the clay. So this is Jim's composition. And you can see all the hands, and these are people who are not necessarily skilled. They're art students, but they're not trained necessarily. And so they had artists working with them, skilled people. There's 5 hands on 2 hands, and it was performative. It was, temporal in many ways. The figures deteriorated slowly. This is in Philadelphia, on the street in Philadelphia. This is Owen's composition. And I've included Owen in here. He's the one eating the hot dog, all the way on the right. But yeah. Okay, so this was, and I really enjoyed the process. There's everybody was absorbed. And what's really fascinating is, of course, I figured about 250 pounds of clay per figure, but the bodies were made by consensus. Essentially everybody's working on this at the same time, and they're achieving something, what doesn't look right, and it comes together. So this is different, this is a different place. This is the Castle Hill Center for the Arts in Truro, Cape Cod. And I was invited to do a sculpture for propose a sculpture for their 50th anniversary. So I proposed the protesters, the poses of resistance, as I was calling them. So I built the 5 armatures in Philadelphia, rented a truck, took them up there, and then I did a workshop. We had, I guess, about 7 people, and we did 5 figures in 1 week. And again, body by consensus. It's also a question. It's a question of authorship. Is this my work? Which is really kind of an interesting. I certainly came up with the concept, but I didn't model all of these necessarily. You kind of go through and spend as much time adjusting things as you can, but it's not my modeled form. Some details, you can see the generalized rendering. Okay, so a subject, you saw images in the beginning of the union team, right? So I'm bargaining at school on the bargaining table team. So I'm thinking about labor. So I think I should do a series of sculptures about labor. And my husband found this in Leonardo da Vinci's book, drawing book, and it says figures to represent labor. And I love that title because it's not figures laboring, they're nude. He drew them nude. So, but because they're nude, they're representing this other idea. But this is things that he witnessed. So I thought, okay, should I go around the city and take pictures of people that are doing activities, looking at art? Euclid's with her performances in the 70s, scrubbed the sidewalks, scrubbed the steps of museums. Look at all the poses. They're all bending over. I'm responding very much to that kinesthetic experience of that's the kind of pose that represents labor. Looking at movies, this is The Ghost and Mrs. Muir, fabulous movie, at least the first half anyway. But look, Martha, the servant, is on the ground, on her hands and knees. Lucy says at one point, "My Martha," and this is her servant. So of course they had an affectionate relationship and all that, and thank goodness, she treated her well. But she was essentially, her possession. So I'm getting lots of stills of this action that she's on the floor, recreating her hairstyle, and the pose. This is 13 inches long. That's just the first. I looked throughout the rest of the movie, and she's standing up for the rest of carrying laundry or something. So it wasn't as expressive of labor. Zadie Smith, the author that I'm very into right now, she said, "I moved to another time." Her latest book was historical fiction, which was unusual for her. So she said, "I moved to another time to protect the ability to have an amorphous self, to explore something current from more perspectives than the current moment sometimes allows." So I thought that was interesting because I'm starting to look at, I thought the historical photography was a good way to go. Looking at that, my neighbor has an amazing collection of photography. Okay, this is the next piece I did was based on that photograph right before, and these are poses of labor. It was accepted by the community. So again, continuing the series, looking at art now. Pissarro, focusing on this from Millet, the gleaners. I especially like the concept. The gleaners are the people who come through after the field has been harvested. They're the most needy people in the community, and they're able to take whatever is left. This time back in Truro, we reposed, recycled the protester armatures and reposed them. And Jessica, thank goodness, I thought you left. Jessica, my assistant, a fabulous assistant for this project, working on a figure. There were a small number of us, 6. We did the armatures and the modeling in a week. No, 4 days, because it was Juneteenth, and we had Juneteenth off. We went to the beach. I cried. So this is the piece completed. Shows you the setting. And the hope is for some grasses to grow around them, so they have some kind of context. And this is the last slide. So thank you all for coming. Yeah. I'm here for questions if anybody wants to ask anything. Well.
I noticed you didn't have any bases for all the sculptures. How would they stand up without falling?
Steel armatures. Oh, these? Which?
You know, like the last clay pieces.
Okay, yeah. So the armatures have like an L that comes out. So there's the foot, and then it goes forward, and then it goes like that. And then I'll add another strip of rebar or something. And then so each one is sort of like, the foots are expanded, so the base expands. And since they're in the ground, even the ones on concrete were Tapconned into the concrete. But then you just add another beam. I added them with U-bolts and staked them into the ground. Totally fine. Yeah.
So you did direct modeling in plaster early on in your career.
Yeah. Steve Weiss.
What?
Steve Weiss. Do you guys know Steve Weiss?
Yeah.
Yeah. I had him in school, and we did a direct modeled torso, and it was pretty great. I liked it. It was, you know.
Continue doing that, or it's really
No, I didn't. I didn't. No, as I said, that figure took 1.5 years. And no, it is. And if you don't know, it's small batches, like, you know, maybe this smaller than the size of a coffee cup. And, you know, you're putting it on, and then you're working it with a serrated tool, and then maybe carving it and afterwards. But you have to keep the plaster wet, clean and wet, in order for the other plaster to adhere. So if you're talking about a life-size figure, there's hours and hours. This is why my forearms are like rock. You know, hours and hours of using a squirt bottle. You know, one hand and another hand the bottle. But it's really labor intense. Yeah. Yes.
You mentioned that Gustav Flaubert was suffering during the years when you wrote the so I was wondering if you were suffering when you were working on your stuff that's derived.
Not at all. Thank you for caring, though. No. You know, if you've ever, I mean, I know I don't know how many sculptors are in the room, but you know, sculpting is, you know, in my classroom, if we have a modeling project in class, the whole class goes silent. You know, it's so engrossing, so involving. And I just think it just pulls you, it's so much pleasure. You know, it just pulls you out of any grief, you know, you might have in your life. But no, you know, I was sort of making a lot of that maybe, but no, I'm enjoying all of it, you know. Yeah. Uh-huh.
So I showed us you work with 3D modeling process throughout there were any other mediums, like shooting mediums that you might work with along the process, or do you mainly focus with 3D media?
You mean like drawing or something like that? I do not do drawing. I don't. You know, someone else asked me, the taxi driver asked me that in Philadelphia. Do you draw before you make a sculpture? I'm like, whoa, who are you? This is really, no, it's a good question. But I don't. I you know, maybe it's that tactility. You know, it's sort of like, because I'm finding these images, you know, I'm finding images already. I don't have to necessarily create an image or to work out, you know, and then my working out process is with the armature. And, you know, so, and I, you know, really careful about, and you have to be really careful about how I pose the armature. The armature represents the skeleton, and it's responsive as the skeleton is. You know, you bend it right in the same place as that the skeleton moves. So I'm constantly trying to achieve the idea that I want at every stage. So yeah, no, and I'm ashamed that I don't draw. I'm ashamed of it. You know, you're supposed to draw, right? You know, but I don't, and it's not. I don't know. Do I sketch in clay? No, I don't even sketch in clay. Yeah, no, and I think that's yeah, yeah. Again, you know, I'm sure that's a failing, you know. Well, you know, and there's changes that can happen while you're working on it too, you know. So you're not locked into anything necessarily, you know. So you can respond and intuit constantly, you know. So yeah.
The microcrystalline wax you're using, since it's edible and also used in cosmetic products.
Since it's what?
Edible? No, it isn't.
It's
not the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it's used in cosmetics, right?
I don't know. Yeah. No, it's a petroleum product. Yeah.
It's my question moved then.
Well. Yeah. Yeah. It's a no, it's a petroleum. It's a petroleum product. I mean, like Vaseline is also a petroleum product, and that's inert. You know, you can actually eat that, and nothing happens. I wouldn't. I'm not recommending it, but it's good for cats if they have hairballs, apparently.
Maybe one more question. Your big clay pieces, they're temporary, correct?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I wanted to tell you about that, but go ahead.
I'm just wondering if you ever had any collectors want to purchase them and figure out a way to make them last longer.
That would be very nice. But there is the woman, Sherry Mitterall at Castle Hill, where I've done a few of them. She's, you know, it's sort of like, well, these are temporal. It's about the deterioration, kind of, you know, but she wants them to last longer, So I actually made a change in that. Thank you for asking this, because I forgot to say this. You know, the addition of the straw originally, and I even sealed them with a concrete sealant, this sort of a breathable concrete sealant. And they still deteriorated. So what I was discovering was that the straw was acting like a wick and pulling the water into the body and then helping to break the pieces off. You know, if the straw's there when it's dry, it works like reinforced concrete. You know, it makes it stronger. But since the water is getting in there, things are deteriorating. So she was pushing me. Can we make them last longer? I want them to last longer. So this last time, we didn't use the straw at all. And they're lasting a long time. Yeah, so. But no one's given me any money for them, no. But I think it'd be fun, you know, to go places and get paid and do them. Yeah. Yeah. Right?
That's called a workshop.
Yeah, workshop. workshop. Yeah, that's my ideal. Mm-hmm. Owen?
What's on your mind now? What do you think about?
Yeah, I'm thinking about dead branches, actually. We went to Joshua Tree, and there's a bunch of dead trees there. The cedar trees, they're real twisted, and they were really beautiful, and I have lots of pictures of dead trees. But also and also beauty. I mean, your question about the unfortunate, the things that bothered me. I do think that come to think of it, I just want to look at beauty. I just want to concentrate on beauty just for a little bit. Yeah. So I'm thinking more. I'm thinking the wall pieces, more another wall piece maybe. I don't know, but it's going to involve branches. Thanks for the question. Thanks for coming.